What's up, metal and heavy music fans? These are 10 of my favorite modern black metal albums. So this is just a sampling and in no particular order, but we're going to start with Toke and Noregs Vaapen. I feel like this is one of the more underrated projects on this list and also one of the best to see live. I considered the debut as well, but in addition to having arguably the best banjo solo in metal history on Mirror, which was also magnificent live, this also has one of the most consistent run times while also giving each track its own personality. The opener is somehow all at once eerie, ominous, and infectious. The beat and little picked out melodies seem to encourage a bit of a satanic rock and roll party, which is fitting to their energy on stage. Nordbundet is also another personal favorite with the more head-bobbing energy and malevolent chord progressions. Dark, but incredibly fun. On a somewhat similar note, we have Watain with Sworn to the Dark. God of Death. This album is also loaded with attitude right from the opening guitar hook, but alongside great dynamics and pace changes, mixing the thrashy, punky stuff with epic, doomy tremolo builds and echoing drums. I'd also say that the production perfectly captures the icy, bleak atmosphere while still effectively balancing all of the instrumentation. I like the bendy Inquisition riffs on the title track. Underneath the Cenotaph has great drumming and thrashy riffs. Love the start-stop guitar with the bass rumble on Darkness and Death, mixed with the more dissection-y sounding stuff. And then Stellavor is a particularly potent conclusion, just brimming with angst and evil. Honestly, these two albums would make for a great double feature.
You should watch them back to back as a double feature and then hang yourself.
Okay.
Then we have Ascension with Consolamentum. Another probably lesser known name on this list, and it's a concept album dealing with the spiritual journey and transformation of a human soul towards salvation. Once more, the production does a great job of providing enough dynamic range to let all of the parts shine while maintaining a layer of grit and grime. It's an unforgiving wall of distortion, but never at the expense of melody, always with a simple, catchy hook lurking in the shadows. These riffs range from the slow and doomy Grey Light Sibling to relentless dissection-esque picking patterns and solos on Amok, and the insidious driving hook of Rebellion Flesh in particular will be stuck in your head for days. As for the vocals, the delivery on Angel of the Burning Sun is quite worthy of conjuring the devil himself. If you've never checked this album out, do yourself a favor and fix that right now. Next up is Nocturnal Mortem with Voice of Steel. Nocturnal Mortem takes all the best parts of black, folk, and progressive metal and brings them together into the best possible fusion. The approach is somewhat similar to Moon Sorrow, making for a more atmospheric approach than some of the other albums on this list, but the result also carries with it the many years of honing their black metal craft. The title track is an incredible opening with big, lumbering power chords and pounding drums complemented by actual sounds of steel striking anvil, before launching into its infectious, folky flute melody and layers of backing vocals. Ukraine being another personal favorite in a similar style. But if that's not heavy enough for you, there's also stuff like the blast beat driven fires of Valkyrie. Either way, this is an absolute masterpiece. Then we have Absu with Abzu. Abzu is easily the most technical band on this list with their almost Dillinger-esque no-holds-barred take on black and thrash. Terra might be their seminal album, but this is easily the best of their post-2010s material. Once more, Prescriptor delivers some of the best drumming you'll find in the entire genre alongside his instantly recognizable syncopated croak. And now sadly ejected guitarist Vis Krom delivers highly frenetic, calculated, and always memorable guitar work that seems to owe more to Ben Weinman than any black metal musician. The entire thing is only 35 minutes, and during that time there's not a single track that isn't amazing. But my personal favorites are Earthripper, Ontologically It Became Time and Space, and the strangely catchy Abraxas Connexus. By the way, understand that because I'm limiting myself to just 10, there's a ton of other albums I realize that I'm leaving out, so support the video by leaving your favorite modern black metal albums in the comments, and maybe I'll do a part 2. But next up we have Imperial Triumphant with Vile Luxury. Some, including the band themselves, would probably hesitate to merely call this a black metal band, but from their obvious influences in the likes of Deathspell Omega to their dark aesthetic of their stage show, which is another one I'd highly recommend by the way, they absolutely belong on this list. Vile Luxury is an ode to their home of New York City, which they describe as like the corpse of a giant, once so bright and grand and spectacular and now filled with greedy maggots writhing towards their share of success. Sonically, this is conveyed through highly improvisational sounding fusions of jazz and dissonant black metal, also frequently leaning on harsh brass instrumentation in addition to the grinding distortion, sickening howls, and absolutely psychotic drumming. Lead single Swarming Opulence serves as a great summary, but that muted trumpet solo on the intro of Cosmopolis is as close as you'll get to walking those cold streets at night without actually being there. Mad David Lynch vibes as well.
My socks are on fire!
You can also check out the on-location interview I did with the band right here on the channel for much more. Then we have Inquisition with obscure verses for the Multiverse. Another band where I could choose from a number of their albums, but track for track, this is probably my favorite. Inquisition are also another one of those groups that you can instantly recognize from their guitar sound. They have this very specific style of riffing that really captures their whole cosmic aesthetic. Lots of wailing, bending, and contorting that give the guitars their own malevolent voice alongside the actual vocals. And on that note, I found that the latter are often the make or break element for new listeners, as these croaks are about as froggy as you can get. Regardless, this is worship of Satan on a completely different level, reaching across time and universal planes. I could name highlights, but it would basically be the entire track listing. Maybe start with Force of the Floating Tomb or the hypnotic Spiritual Plasma Evocation. Moving into the final three, we have Schammasch with Triangle. So I can count on my fingers the small number of successful double albums out there, and yet somehow this Swiss band pulled off the almost unthinkable triple. Simply put, this album is absolutely breathtaking. Probably owing much to Blut aus Nord 777 Cosmosophy, which is a fair shout out for this list as well, Triangle is a transcendent and highly meditative piece of work combining sermon-like black metal and intoxicating ambience to glorious effect. Awakening from the Dream of Life offers a great summary of the always evolving dynamic nature of the songwriting, from the circular palm-muted hook that drives the first minutes, to the slow layering that follows, to the escalation of the tapping solo, and finally that sudden shift to the double bass. And the powerful single Metanoia is like a chilling goodbye note before plunging into the dreary purgatory of part 3. From the powerful swells of intensity that border on O Father, O Satan, O Son, to the extended periods of dark ambient in the latter half, Triangle is a must-listen album. And also the band's finest work to date, in my opinion. Speaking of meditation, we also have Cult of Fire with Ascetic Meditation of Death. From the opening sitar and throat singing of Black Blood Slaughter, you know you're in for something special with this one. Not to mention that gorgeous cover art featuring an interpretation of Kali, the Hindu goddess of death, time, and change, concepts that are deeply woven into the themes of this record. Infernal Vlad has delivered a number of incredible works through both Cult of Fire and his Death Karma project, but this may still be his finest work. I remember being genuinely awestruck the first time I heard this, and the feeling has never fully worn off. From Vlad's venomous delivery to the malevolent guitars to the great use of Hammond organ and other additional instrumentation, this one commands your full attention right up to the bookending sitar of the closing track. And then finally, we have Deathspell Omega with Foss. Now, while these albums are not in order, this had to be number one. If those last albums were acts of restoration, true to the album cover, this is just a pure tumble into infinity. Lyrically, it covers some pretty heady concepts, but I don't need a double major in philosophy and theology to tell you that this album is absolute hellfire. To me, this is where Deathspell Omega fully realized their message to its purest unholy form, and you can hear my thoughts on their full discography too in the tier list that I just did. But as for this album, even the quiet, more ambient section sections only ratchet up the tension, as with the break with the distant harrowing chorals on the Shrine of Mad Laughter suddenly transitioning back into the blast beats. And speaking of which, the drumming on this album is every bit as insane as stuff like Gorguts, alongside those trademark jangly tremolos sounding like a swarm of insects. I could go on and it only gets better each time I listen, but just suffice it to say, if somehow you have still not listened to this album, you are missing out on one of the best black metal albums of all time, period. Check out this playlist for more black metal videos, including tier lists of classic black metal albums, and also this for my favorite black metal albums of 2022 so far. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.